You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network. This is the ThunderQuack Podcast, the official podcast of ThunderQuack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's ThunderQuack time!
Hello and welcome to the all-new ThunderQuack Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Kunkin.
And here we are. This is it. It's
brand new.
I know I had said May 19th. It's the 20th when we're recording this. Yesterday was the 19th. But the new Patreon stuff all launched over the weekend.
Right, yeah.
And it's a holiday Monday for us in Canada. It's Victoria Day today. I think Memorial Day weekend is next weekend in the States.
Oh, really?
I don't think that they're synced up this
They're
year.
definitely not, because I know that I've been getting lots of emails today for work.
Yeah. But we had the day off, so it made more sense to kind of move it to the Monday. Mm-hmm. And Monday nights are when we're going to normally record. We're recording during the day on a Monday, but normally we'll be recording the new podcast Monday nights. This is the new-ish format. It's not really going to change that much from what we've been doing on the exclusives. The one difference is that for the first time, with the exception of a couple of exclusive roundtables that I put out on MP3, this is the first free episode of the ThunderQuack Podcast. Yeah. So you may have come here from one of our other shows, or you may actually be getting this episode. You'll get this episode and the next 7 episodes all in the feed that you're already subscribed to, whether that's Quiver or irregularly scheduled. If you're subscribed to those feeds, you'll get this podcast, because that's exactly what this podcast is.
Yeah.
So Amanda and I had done irregularly scheduled for a little while, and it was just I don't know, it was a little bit of extra overhead that wasn't really necessary. Not a lot of people were listening to it. More people listened to Quiver for sure, and all of the same people that were listening to irregularly scheduled are ThunderQuack supporters. So
might as
it's
well
almost
just
like
do
one
the
to
ThunderQuack one, right?
Yeah, so we were just doing the ThunderQuack Podcast. So if you were subscribed to that feed and you haven't gotten anything in a while, that's why. But you probably already know that, because you're probably already a ThunderQuack supporter. But for the few people who maybe weren't, that's why you're getting this now. And the new home of this content will be on ThunderQuack.com moving forward. But yeah, if you're already subscribed to those other shows, you're getting this, because when Arrow ends, this is what we're gonna do. Yeah,
keep the podcast alive, and it's like the summer of Smallville, but it's like the summer of Star Wars, basically. I think.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah. So what we're gonna do is we're going to run down the news from the last week. I don't actually have a rundown.
Well, I was gonna say, were we supposed to look at something? No. Usually, you send me a document.
No, but it's basically everything that's happened since the last time we recorded, which was only about 2.5 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah.
So there's not really that much to talk about, and we don't need the rundown to do it.
We recorded last week. Oh,
Quiver.
You mean the ThunderQuack?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. Right, because the ThunderQuack, we've been doing that one for a while.
Yeah,
I keep forgetting that we've been doing the ThunderQuack for a while.
Yeah.
Which now, if you're listening to this, you get back catalog, so you can go back and listen to all of the ThunderQuack episodes. Yeah, because we've been doing a lot. Some of them are really fun, actually.
I think so. I've always been really happy with what we do on ThunderQuack, and it's always been a shame to me that it's behind a paywall. So it's nice now that it's not. Now all of the content is out there and it's free and accessible. There maybe in the future we'll get back to doing some sort of exclusive podcast just for supporters, but essentially, if you are listening to this for free and you're wondering what do you get if you pay extra, the regular show is what you're hearing right now, which, we have our little intro, preamble sort of stuff, and then we go into news, and then we'll have a big topic every week. But for this summer, what we're going to be doing is a preview of a new show that we're going to do starting in January called ThunderQuack Ranked. So we've got, we'll have the 3 shows for ThunderQuack. We have the ThunderQuack Podcast, which is just strictly speaking a podcast. And then we have ThunderQuack Reviewed, which is reviews of movies. So Detective Pikachu is up on our YouTube page right now. Or if you're a Patreon supporter at $5 and above, you get the MP3. And then we'll have ThunderQuack Ranked, which will also live on YouTube and be an exclusive MP3 at $5 and above on Patreon. And ThunderQuack Ranked is going to be us going through franchises and discussing each entry in the franchise and then putting it in a ranking. So for the summer, in the lead up to, and this is all, there's a really big asterisk next to this. In the lead up, in the summer, we're going to do all 8 of the mainline Star Wars movies, and we're going to rank them. So we're starting today in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Phantom Menace with episode 1, the Phantom Menace. And then we're going to go through the other 7 movies. But the big asterisk is time permitting, because if the kid comes early, my wife is pregnant, for those who don't know that. And if that kid comes early, that means that we will go on a brief hiatus, and we'll record whatever's left when things have kind of settled down a little bit around here. But the hope is that we can get through. I think we're pretty solid. The baby's not due for about 9-10 weeks, but that doesn't necessarily.
Maybe they'll be very punctual.
Yeah, very punctual or early. So the plan for the summer is our big topic every week will be our discussion of the different movies.
I can't believe we haven't talked about Star Wars yet. I guess it's just because you podcast so much about Star Wars on other things
it's a different show, right?
Yeah, that I haven't thought about the fact that we've never actually really podcasted about Star Wars.
That's the other good thing about the ThunderQuack podcast, right? Is that we were stuck talking about Arrow, which meant that there was a lot of DC talk. There's a lot of comic book talk in general. The MCU would come up just kind of by default, because you're talking about comic book TV and movies, so you end up talking about that stuff in the Netflix shows and stuff. But with this, we'll actually be able to make more of a conscious effort to talk about the other things that we love, like Star Wars, which is, we'll talk more about this on next week's episode when we talk about Attack of the Clones, but that's how Amanda and I became friends in the first place.
And Shakespeare.
And Shakespeare. And
Shakespeare and Star Wars.
There's no difference with the prequels, though. And that'll be. Let's save all this for the end, because we got to do our news first. So, let's get into that. Let's get into the news. So since the last time that we recorded, we had recorded just after Endgame had come out, right. And there were some other big movies from May that hadn't come out yet. So what else? What came out the first week of May? Something did. I'm asking the wrong person.
I don't.
Detective Pikachu came out a week or two ago.
And we had sort of overlapped because we had sort of gotten into May because we were a little late on it, but it was where Sonic had come out technically May 1st, the trailer. The trailer, yeah. And stuff.
But Endgame ended up grossing over $1 billion in its first weekend, which broke.
It's now beat Avatar, if that's the record. That's the standard.
Yeah, and since we recorded, it has blown way past Avatar. And the thing that you have to remember about the Avatar record is that's the entire run of Avatar.
Right.
The entire time it was in theaters. And Avatar was in theaters. It came out in, I want to say, November.
Yeah.
And it was in the theaters until March. You could very easily go see it, because all these theaters had added 3D screens for the first time. That is the one good thing about Avatar, is the movie itself doesn't hold up, but it was revolutionary, and it really changed in the same way that Attack of the Clones, which we'll talk about next week, changed things with digital projection. Avatar made 3D a standard in a lot of theaters. Yeah. And because there weren't a lot of other 3D movies at the time, at least not movies of the same caliber in 3D, Avatar got an extended run. It got to hang around in theaters for a really long time. And it did well during that entire run. But that kind of inflates the numbers compared to some other movies. Because
it really did, because it was like more expensive.
It was more expensive at the time, and
it was Tolkien and John Wick 3. Those are the ones.
Yeah, John Wick 3 came out this past Friday. I haven't gotten to see it yet. I still need to see John Wick 2, honestly, but
I haven't watched any of them.
Really? John Wick's so good.
People keep telling me that.
It's so good. So the thing that's cool about John Wick is that John Wick on the surface is like an action spectacle, right? Yeah. And on those merits alone, it's fantastic because it is. I think they're the best action movies, like straight action, not like genre,
right? Yeah,
you know, but like just straight action, like guys with guns doing backflips, right? The sort of thing that Arrow excelled at on TV in its first few seasons, before it got a little too stale. Yeah. But that same sort of action feel. But then there's another surface underneath of like almost it's the characters are kind of Greek myth inspired.
Oh,
like there's kind of it's not just Greek myth. Like there's a bunch of mythologies sort of woven together. But there's Movies with Mikey, which is a really great show on YouTube. Mikey Newman does an excellent dissection of John Wick to sort of, and I actually watched that before I watched John Wick. Like I had kind of written John Wick off, like I think a lot of people did. It's like, it's just an action movie. Yeah. Like it's the same as like Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise. Right? Like whatever, you know. Yeah. It's a Bourne.
Yeah. Bourne Identity. Right? Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
And then I watched this thing and I was like, oh, there's like way more to this.
Really?
To this movie.
Now I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Because that's the same thing to me. I'm kind of like, if I want to see Jason Bourne.
And I think that the John Wick franchise will go on for a long time, which means that at some point we'll do it on Ranked. Which means that you'll have a reason to go back and watch them. Nice. But yeah, there's like a really cool undercurrent, like sort of subtextual narrative going on in the John Wick movies. Having only seen the first one, but knowing a little bit about the second and the third, that I find really cool. That's it's, you know what, they are actually the Matrix done better.
Like better?
Yeah, because the first Matrix movie I think does a really good job of that. Like sort of having, it's an action movie, but then there's this sort of meta narrative to it that's about more than just the action.
Yeah.
And the action is just sort of like a way to get you interested. But John Wick, because it's Keanu Reeves as well, the comparison is really easy to make. But stylistically, like they're very similar stylistically. Like there's a reason why he was cast.
Right.
And it's coming out of the Matrix. So that's kind of how they're tangentially connected. But it's almost it's one of those things where it's like it wouldn't be as good as it was if it weren't for the Matrix. But it's a better take on the sort of action with a meaning,
right? Cool.
Sort of nice. Matrix type thing.
Maybe I'll watch it.
Yeah, the first one I think is on Netflix. Okay. But yeah, so John Wick 3 came out this weekend. I don't know how it's doing. I haven't really checked, but Endgame destroyed. Yeah. And then Detective Pikachu is also doing super well.
Oh, really? Because I've been hearing mixed things, so I didn't know like how it was actually doing.
It made like $179 million in its opening weekend. The budget was $150 million.
Oh wow! Okay,
right. So it made back its production budget. You also have to add on marketing and etc. But it's Pokemon Detective Pikachu, right? Like. Yeah. When the movie was announced, a lot of people looked at it and went, there's no way that this movie comes out or is any good. And I think that a lot of people were really surprised at A, the fact that it happened, B, who was involved, and C, that it was actually a pretty good movie. Nice. It's a kid's movie.
Yeah.
There's it's a family movie. There's no getting away from that. It's Pokemon.
Yeah.
So people who thought that it was going to be Deadpool but with Pokemon were deluded in the first place. But it is. It's a good movie. Nice. I mean, you can go listen to the ThunderQuack Reviewed to hear me and Aaron talk about it in detail. But I'll just say here. I had a bad experience in the movie theater with Kara didn't want to sit and watch the movie. She was kind of being obnoxious. We went to a later showing, to a 5 o'clock showing. So she was a little bit antsy. So I had to take her out of the theater twice. Crystal had to take her out of the theater twice to talk to her and say, you gotta stop, sit, watch the movie. So that kind of interrupted, the viewing experience. Things, But even worse than that, the kids behind us, their parents didn't care that their kids were disrupting the movie. So I'll say I may have made a point to say before the movie, because I could tell that these kids were going to be a little obnoxious, to say to Cara, we don't, very loudly, we don't talk during the movie, we sit nicely in our seat, right, going through all the rules of the movie theater, hoping that these kids behind me might hear it and a little bit of it might rub off. That did not happen. And the parents were very clearly not interested in making sure that their kids were behaving, because the little girl behind me was just kicking my seat the whole movie. So that kind of
seat kicker.
Yeah, that kind of wrecked my experience in the theater. But the more I thought about the movie after the fact, the more I realized, I liked
the actual movie itself.
Yeah, I just didn't. I was a little bit distracted and didn't quite catch as much of the humor. I wasn't in the right mood to enjoy the humor and stuff as much as I would have otherwise, and as well as catching all of the inside jokes and references to the Pokemon anime and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth going to see.
Cool.
And a lot of people agree because it did really well. The sequels are already in the works. Apparently, there's 2 sequels to Detective Pikachu specifically, as well as spin-offs. That are all sort of in development.
Cool.
So yeah, I think that we'll be watching Pokemon movies in the theater for a little while, which is nice. Because most video game movies are terrible. But they managed to pull it off this time. So, I guess the other big piece of news is just the end of Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah.
Did you watch the finale last night?
Sure did. Yeah. No spoilers.
Yeah, without going into spoilers, because I think maybe we need to kind of save that for a little bit, and then we can talk about Game of Thrones. In the future, maybe in a couple weeks, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Don't have any particular interest in necessarily diving into it that much. We're talking about.
Yeah. Did you? How did you feel about the end?
Cultural phenomenon. A little disappointed.
Yeah.
Someone posted a meme, comparing it to the feeling of watching the last episode of Lost. And I think that's very sort of similar. That there's all of this, it was such a cultural phenomenon, and and then you just sort of leave and you're like, okay.
That happened.
Yeah. And which is okay. I'm whatever. I don't know what else I expected it to be, and it's entertaining television. I'm not going to cancel my HBO subscription immediately. Apparently, his Dark Materials, the trailer dropped for that. Yeah. So that's the other thing is HBO being no, stick around.
There was a very specific promo at the beginning of Game of Thrones last night that was the end of one story is the beginning of another sort of thing. And it talking about the Game of Thrones is done, but here's all this other stuff
that's coming,
and showed all of their new shows. And don't get me wrong, HBO, these other shows look phenomenal, right? Euphoria with Zendaya. Zendaya, I think it's pronounced Zendaya. Everybody says Zendaya, but it's supposed to be Zendaya.
Good to know.
Yeah, that looks fantastic. Looks like a great show. Not gonna watch it. I just don't have the time. This one with Danny McBride and John Goodman that they promoted last night looks fantastic. They're Bible Belt revival preachers, tent preachers. The big sort of show, but they're terrible people. They're just in it for the money.
Interesting. That's gonna be.
Yeah, and it looks like a fantastic show.
Yeah. Danny McBride.
Yeah, and
Barry's supposed to be really good too. It's already out.
Yeah, Barry's supposed to be fantastic, and I haven't watched that either.
Yeah.
But like I'm not going to continue my subscription for those shows. Now, his Dark Materials, you got me.
Yeah.
You've got me because I love The Golden Compass. I love that book. There are very few books that I've read from cover to cover, right? Like, I'm just not a reader. I listen to audiobooks a lot. But I'm talking about, like, a physical book that I read cover to cover. And Golden Compass is one of them. And I never ended up, like, continuing on with it because what happened is I finished The Golden Compass about 15 minutes before you came to pick me up to go watch The Golden Compass in the theater.
What?
Yeah, you and I saw it together.
No way.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
And the movie was so disappointing. So disappointing.
I had no frame of reference, so it was just like a mediocre movie.
But that's exactly it. Is that it was a mediocre movie.
It would have killed your
and
momentum.
And then on top of that, it missed so many of the points of the book.
Yeah.
I've
heard that. I've heard that really, very much so.
This is the thing. It neutered the book, right?
Yeah.
The book is intense.
Yeah.
Like, there's some stuff that happens in it, and I won't say any of it because now people are going to get into his Dark Materials, and I don't want to ruin anything of what's coming. Because people who are going to experience that for the first time are in for a treat. Like, because the trailer that they showed, they get it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's everybody knows
HBO.
the biggest problems with the previous, and apparently it's being made by the BBC.
Yeah.
And it's got like distributed like the HBO. So it's like I trust those two organizations to do storytelling correctly.
Yeah.
I still keep HBO for John Oliver, like that's what I watch, and then Veep is also really good. Yeah. So I like watching both of those.
So when Arrow is done, and depending on everything that's on Disney Plus, more than likely I'll be getting rid of cable, basic cable, because the only other thing is news. I don't care about live sporting events, so that doesn't matter to me. So I'll be missing out on the news, but I can actually watch that through my. We have the Amazon Fire TV.
Oh, interesting.
Smart TVs, and you can just get the Global TV app, and if I want to watch the news, I can just watch it that way. But if it's basically, it depends on whether or not Star Wars Resistance is day and date on Disney Plus, or if I have to have a Disney XD subscription in order to get that. But even still, I might look at doing TELUS has another thing called Pick.
Yeah, where you can just choose the channels you want.
Pick a couple of channels instead of having to pay. We pay like $60 or something like that for all the channels, and we don't watch them. Right? I watch DuckTales. There's a couple of shows, but there's enough on Netflix that you never need to go anywhere else. And then we also have Amazon Prime.
So
But if I cut cable, then I'll pay for Crave with the movies plus all HBO, FX, Showtime, right?
Yeah, all the streaming services go directly to the source, right? We need to be able. I just had this revelation, and it was so satisfying. And while you've been talking about this, I'm like, oh man, we need to stop going off on these tangents and then just start talking about the thing we're supposed to be talking about. And it was this beautiful revelation where I was like, we are literally talking about the thing we're supposed to be talking about.
This is all we have to do.
It was so great. I just want everybody to realize how unstressed I am right now. It's so great.
When the conversation dies down, I'll go, okay, let's talk about Phantom Menace, right? No.
So good.
This is the show now.
Right?
This
is
the
show
now.
We just get to talk about things that we want to talk about. It's so good.
Yeah, especially because this week I don't have a rundown in front of me. But the other great thing is that because we're going to be doing this every week, except so if you haven't heard any of the other content where we explain the schedule, we do 3 weeks on and then 1 week off, which is really perfect for Star Wars because we'll do episode 1, 2, and 3, and then you'll know we're going to take a break the next week, so no podcast that week, and then 4, 5,
really
6,
convenient because I'm in
and
France,
then a break.
So
well, perfect.
That's good.
I
actually was going to talk to you about schedule after this. I was like, what am I going to do? But that's good.
So we'll be on 3 weeks. Ish. Like
whenever we feel like it.
There's flexibility here because Amanda goes on vacation 10 times a year. So when that happens, we'll probably adjust the schedule a little bit.
Yeah.
So we might end up doing 2 weeks and then a week off and then maybe 4 weeks in a row or something like that. But yeah, it's sort of keeping within that sort of that planned rhythm.
It'll be good.
So that we're not just podcasting. One of the things that I notice with a lot of people who create content on the internet, especially when it's like Patreon funded and supported, is burnout.
Yeah.
Because when you start, like we're saying about going directly to the source with HBO, with Amazon, with Netflix, blah blah blah. Patreon is going directly to the source and paying us, right? So people are coming to us and they're paying us for the content, and then there almost becomes a thing of like, well, if I'm not putting something out every week, then why are you paying for Patreon? Like, why are you supporting us on Patreon? That's a little bit different because for some people that's $1, right? For some people it's $5 or $10.
Yeah.
We're not asking for the $15 that Netflix is or the $79.99 a year that Amazon Prime is. These are Canadian dollars, by the way. Or the $20 a month that HBO is, right? So there's a little bit more leeway there. But the idea is that when we were doing Arrow, we had a very clear, I mean, we are still doing Quiver and Arrow, but there's a very clear, like, the show is on this week, so we're doing a podcast this week. So when the show would take a break, we would take a break. And occasionally there'd be a reason to do an extra episode, or when we did Summer of Smallville, stuff like that. But since we're not going to be beholden to a show and when it airs, that means we're going to go all year round. There's not going to be, well, I mean, like around Christmas we'll probably take a multiple week break.
Yeah.
But I don't know, we're sort of yet
we still do the reviews over the Christmas anyways.
Yeah, that's
right?
that's one of the other things is that the reviewed stuff is going to like crank up around Christmas every year because there's like,
we'll figure it out.
There's always like 3 or 4.
But it'll be like, we'll just be like kind to ourselves and kind to people that are listening and figure out what works for everybody, which is nice.
But yeah, this plans in downtime so that you guys know there's an expectation. And then, you know, with the places that I could see this going eventually, we're not pushing ourselves too hard on it. Cause you know, they're like, whether we end up doing like, doing full video or if we ended up doing like a live show or something like that. I don't want to be doing it every week. I just don't want to be stuck into the 52 episodes a year, right? That's a little bit much. So having that time off gives us a week to recharge, but
cool.
Is there any other news in the last week?
Yeah. NASA decided that we're going to the moon in 5 years. Yeah. That was really cool. My friend showed me basically the YouTube video after we watched Game of Thrones. She was like, "Oh yeah, you know that like NASA released like big news," and I was like, "What?" So yeah, there's this whole like, you know, propaganda-esque thing where it's like, and I didn't realize this. Apparently, we haven't been to the moon since like the 70s. Yeah. Which that's like 50 years. It's been 50 years.
Well, and how many actual landings on the moon are there? There's only like 3 or 4.
There's only a handful of them. Yeah. So we're going to apparently build like a space station on the moon, because there's like new technologies and we can harvest ice and all sorts of stuff. But it's like a way station to Mars is kind of how they're planning it. But just like, how cool is that in our lifetime we've never been to the moon, and now we're getting like that? I thought was really cool.
Well, the great thing about it is the technology that they had in the 1960s and 70s in order to show people what was happening was very limited, right? Yeah. And access to that technology was even more limiting. Yeah. Leading to things such as, well, we've never been to the moon.
Yeah, right? Yeah,
conspiracies. People, And so when it comes to moon landing conspiracy theories, and if you want to hear my full thing on this, you can go dig way back into the ThunderQuack archive. Our first year of ThunderQuack. When we did a conspiracy theory roundtable with me, Courtney, and Allison. Which those roundtables that I did with Courtney and Allison are some of my favorite stuff we've ever done with ThunderQuack. Nice. And that conspiracy one's really fun. And I talk about the idea that, okay, yeah, maybe the moon landing is a conspiracy, but I don't think it's the conspiracy that everybody thinks it is, right? Like, we went to the moon. We absolutely 100% went to the moon. There's evidence. Like, you can grab a telescope and you can look and you can see evidence that we've been on the moon. Any person can do that nowadays. But the conspiracy that I like to think is that the footage that we've seen of the moon landing and all the people who are like, oh, it's faked for this reason, and this reason. Stanley Kubrick filmed it. Yeah. There's all these hints in The Shining that point towards the fact that he helped fake the moon landing. I'm like, yeah, maybe they did. Maybe they had a really good reason to fake the footage of the moon landing. Yeah. Because maybe we got there and there was something that they didn't want everybody to see. Ooh. Right? And and that's why we have this fake footage. Because, like, if you want to believe in things like Roswell and
right, like, it's like maybe there was something. Like, yeah.
Why did we go to the moon so soon? Because, like, Roswell happens, and then within a decade,
we went to the moon.
Oh, why? Is there a connection there? I don't know. Ooh. Maybe.
I like that conspiracy theory.
I'm not saying that there is or isn't, but I'm saying what I always say is if you're gonna believe in a conspiracy theory, it needs to be two things. It needs to be believable and it needs to be awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Believing that we faked the moon landing because you just want to be a crappy person that craps on other people's hopes and dreams, that's lame. Yeah. That's lame. That's like flat earthers and stuff. It's like, whatever. If you believe in a conspiracy theory because it allows you to have a little bit more mystery and wonder in your life, and you have a factual basis for wanting to believe it. And it's like, that's the same thing with, like, if you ask me if I believe in Bigfoot, absolutely. 100% I believe in Bigfoot. Why? Not because the evidence is compelling, although there is some compelling evidence out there. It's because I want to live in a world where there's still a possibility that Bigfoot is out there.
That's fair.
So whether or not the tape is faked for Bigfoot or the moon landing was faked or any of that stuff, I don't care. There's enough else out there for me to believe that Bigfoot is real. That we know that the Loch Ness Monster is not real. We know that that's a fake. But the
Ogopogo exists, though.
The Ogopogo does exist. The Ogopogo is real. So for people who don't know, because that's a very like local thing. I don't think local
legend.
I don't think that Ogopogo is national.
Nobody knows.
International.
Nobody knows about the Ogopogo. It's our hometown. Yeah. The small town of Penticton, British Columbia, has a lake monster in the Okanagan Lake. Which I guess kind of Kelowna as well, because the lake connects to everybody. But I like to think of it as a Penticton thing. Yeah. But apparently we have a lake monster, which I just think is really cool. Whatever. Yeah. It's fun to believe.
And I mean, like, Ogopogo is traditionally depicted as a sea serpent, like a dragon sea serpent.
Very much like Nessie.
In reality, Ogopogo is very large sturgeon. But that doesn't mean that that's not awesome.
Yeah.
A sturgeon big enough that you can mistake it for a dragon? That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Ogopogo is real. It's just not what people
It could just be a leftover dinosaur. I like to think of it as a leftover dinosaur. It's in the subgrouping on Wikipedia of lake monster. I like that. There you go. It's very cool.
Yeah. This show doesn't have
there's only so many examples of lake monsters when you go onto the internet. So, this is like a handful when you go here. It's like the Scotland ones, and then there's one in Iceland and Italy, and a couple in Canada. Canada has like 3 or 4. Look at us being...
We got some big lakes.
Some big...
You gotta have a big enough lake to support a monster.
That's true. That's true. Which is good. Anyways.
Yeah.
But going to the moon, I kind of think that's cool.
I think that's awesome.
I mean,
So what I was kind of getting at is that with this moon landing, if this all ends up happening, we have the technology now, and I don't mean as a society. We have the technology now. You and I could very easily put together the kit in order to record visual evidence of the moon landing.
Right.
Provided
you
we're
have
in the
enough.
right place at the right time, right?
Where you could actually see them land on the moon.
But
cool.
anybody in the world could get the equipment in order to see it with their own eyes and to record it themselves. So that to me is the best reason to do it, because all those people out there who doubt that we've been to the moon, it's like, well, let's go now. Let's go now with the technology that we have now. We can easily build something like a permanent structure on the moon, and
but I think that's the thing. They're gonna try to do apparently there's 37 different things planned, and then like a moon base. I mean, I think that's kind of cool that there's gonna be a moon base in our lifetime. There's gonna be people that live on the moon.
Yeah.
Like, that's such science fiction stuff.
Yeah. So my day job is we provide online services to the mining industry, right? Which I don't talk about a lot because it's not that exciting. But one of the places where I always get excited about it is every time we get into the idea of where mining is going in the future, and there are only so many resources on Earth. There are a lot of what's called rare earth minerals, which are things that actually aren't terrestrial,
right?
That we use for things that we actually get from things like comets and asteroids that have hit the Earth.
Yeah, so we can find them on the moon. Yeah.
So the moon is one place to find stuff like that, although it's dangerous because we don't really want to mess with the moon. See the movie The Time Machine for a great example of that going horribly wrong.
But also, what's the Umbrella Academy?
Yeah, the Umbrella Academy is, but more accurately, like we'll do asteroid mining, like and
because you
like
could go out,
celestial
right?
bodies. Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
I do think that within our lifetime that we will see that happen, and knowing what I know of the mining industry and the way that it's going, like I do believe that. I believe that we're gonna see. That more than anything, as much as Elon Musk is acting like he's in it for the scientific exploration of it all, that is not the end goal. The end goal is, like, he's got a real great PR face on his space exploration stuff. That stuff is being funded by people who think that there's who understand the potential of interstellar mining operations.
That'd be cool.
So we'll get. I do believe that we'll see that within our lifetime. Oh. We might be a little bit on the older side when it happens, but
it'll be.
But we'll get to see it.
But I will say, if you're interested, the NASA video, I think it was posted like 5 days ago or 6 days ago on the NASA YouTube site, and it did like make me cry because I think they've named the space, like the lunar module, like the human one.
Yeah.
They've named it Orion, and Orion is like my favorite constellation, so it just makes me like.
Favorite constellation, everybody.
Right? Come on.
Because of the movie Men in Black?
No! I knew what Orion was before I watched Men in Black, which made me happy. It's my uncle, actually one of my only uncles who's passed actually, was an astronomer. And so I remember as kids being at my grandma's house and us out on the like on the grass and like learning as kids the constellations, and because it was so recognizable, it's the only constellation I can constantly find that's not there all the time, because I can also find Cassiopeia and then sometimes one of the Dippers, but Cassiopeia and Orion are like the two constellations that I actually know, and so Orion just reminds me of like my family, which I just think is really cool, and then that it's so popular and that people like know what it is because of Men in Black, I guess.
I think a lot of people knew what Orion's belt was before that. Yeah.
But anyway, so it's really cool, and
it's exciting. I'm like, that's science is cool.
Yeah.
I like science. We like science fiction a lot, and sometimes science fiction is not as fictional as it used to be. Right. We forget it all the time. Whenever I'm putting in my my AirPods, I like one out of every 10 times that I put my AirPods in my ears or take them out, I go like, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like these are like my headphones are 100% wireless.
Yeah.
And like I take them and I put them into a little case to recharge them, and it's like 15 years ago I would have thought that was impossible.
Had I plugged in my Google Home Mini last time we talked, or had I talked about doing it?
You talked about it on the last episode of Quiver. Yeah.
I've been converted.
Yeah.
Having it in my house for 5 days or a little less than that. I think I plugged it in on Thursday. It's been like 4 days or whatever. It's the future. Yeah. I just ask it to do things. I've connected it to my TV. It turns my TV on. It turns on. It won't recommend things for me, which I think is really interesting. On Netflix, like I try to I'm like, hey, can you like tell me like what's the latest stuff on Netflix? It won't. It's like you have to be very specific and tell it what you want to watch and stuff, which I think is good because that makes me less scared about the like But it's the future, man. Like you just. It's how I found out when I didn't want to Google when the last one we went to the moon was. I just asked you just asked Google, and you just it's just.
See, I bought these TVs, and these TVs are Amazon Fire, which is part of the Amazon Echo.
Oh, yeah.
So they're all like the controller has like a little microphone on it, so I can actually tell it like, "I'll play this show." Wow. I don't use it very often because sometimes it's a little bit sketchy, but that means that I'll have to get the Amazon one. We'll get the Echo at some point. I'm thinking like probably Black Friday this year because last year we bought the TV. And I was like, should I get the Amazon Echo Dot as well? And I was kind of hesitant on it. Mm-hmm. And I'm more like, I'm actually like doing Google, like it made sense for you because it was free.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. But also,
I feel like with the Google one, you're kind of tied into the Google,
which I already am, anyways. Like Google is the thing that I have a Chromecast, and I already have a Chromecast, and that's the thing that really works with it. And then my phone is all Google and stuff. So
but I'm much more in the Apple ecosystem, Apple and PlayStation. Yeah. So I'm already kind of outside of Google. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to like start using that Google stuff because I'd rather I'm gonna stick with
adapt what you have already.
Yeah. With what we've got. So I will probably move into that like around Black Friday when everything's super cheap and all, because getting one doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but the ability to
have a couple
put one in every room of the house.
That's the problem that I have now is I'm kind of like, well, I have one in my living room. All I need is one in my bedroom, but I kind of like to just not like be listened to everywhere in my house.
You're not thinking of the possibilities.
I know, because then
of
I
it,
could just
because put one in your bathroom and then you just help to play music while you're in the shower.
Oh yeah, it's cool. I mean, I have a shower radio.
Yeah, but does your shower radio play whatever you want?
No,
it plays the radio.
I know, it's fair.
And it probably doesn't play it well. It's probably crackly.
A little bit, yeah. But you
gotta listen to some guy go, "Hey, did everybody see the Game of Thrones finale last night? Super cool."
I kind of like radio DJs.
I hate radio DJs. It's the worst.
But
they're the most disingenuous people on the planet. They're worse than politicians.
I've been thinking about my house a lot since we last talked, and one of the things I haven't really, I'm just saying, this is now something that's directly correlated to something we talked about on Quiver last week, but my apartment being kind of crappy. Yeah. There are no outlets in my bathroom. Like, I have to blow dry my hair in the living room, so, like, that's,
There are no
outlets in my bathroom.
In your bathroom.
Yeah. It's really upsetting. So
that's super annoying.
Yeah. So my radio is battery powered, so that's why I can listen into it. But it's like I've made.
You're saving money, right? You're putting money away. You're putting it.
Yeah. Just now, just in the last few months, when I've gotten a real job and actually can like afford to pay for things. But it's just because my apartment's really cheap. I'm not moving. Yeah. I understand.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Do you want to get into Star Wars now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Always.
So as I said earlier, yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the Phantom Menace, so that was a good reason for us to... And Arrow finished last week, so it all kind of came together perfectly of like, well, we'll roll right into the ThunderQuack podcast, and we'll start with our ranked discussion on the Phantom Menace. Now, as the rankings go, we can't really do the ranking yet because we've only got one movie. Next week it'll get a little bit more interesting, but it'll get more interesting as we go on.
I mean...
Obviously, episode 1 is going to be number 1 on the ranking right now because it's the only movie in the ranking.
I mean, I've seen them all, and I could probably rank them in my head.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've seen them all, but the idea is that we're watching them with this very specific
purpose
objective,
in mind,
right?
Yes.
So it's been a little while since I've watched The Phantom Menace.
One of my categories will be visceral boredom.
Yeah.
Which movie?
I got you. I'm right there with you for a lot of this movie.
All right.
But I think the last time that I saw the Phantom Menace would have been from start to finish, like actually sat down to watch it, would have been Phantom Menace 3D when it got the 3D release about 5 years ago, I think. 5 or 6 years ago. Let's see. What is it now? It's 2019? I was going to say 5 years ago because it was before Celebration Anaheim. No, it might have been even longer than that. Wow. Phantom Menace 3D might have been... Yeah, Phantom Menace 3D was like 2011? 2012?
Yeah, that's a while ago.
Wow.
When did that Blu-ray come out, though? Because that's about the last time I watched it, so...
The set of all of them? Yeah, that was 2012.
Okay. That may be... I'm actually really impressed. Apparently, I did watch it all the way through because my Blu-ray player remembered, and then it started it at the end, like, for the credits, and I was like, good for me! I watched this.
You did do it.
I did watch it.
Yeah, so it's been a really long time since I've sat down and not just watched clips or just watched part of it or had it on in the background sort of thing. And I sat down to watch it today, earlier today, and I watched it with Kara. Like I said, okay, we're gonna watch Star Wars, and she loves Star Wars, but she loves Chewbacca, and Rey. Yeah, those are her favorite characters. She likes BB-8. She likes R2-D2. I found out today she actually likes C-3PO quite a bit. Which was one of the highlights of watching it with her.
Is this the first time she'd seen it?
This is the first time she's seen the Phantom Menace. This is the first prequel she's seen.
Cool.
She's watched some of the Clone Wars with me, and she's watched a lot of Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Resistance with me. So there are a couple characters that she's familiar with already. But the movie starts, and when I watch Star Wars movies with her, this is the third one we've watched. We've watched Empire, Return of the Jedi, and The Phantom Menace, which go ahead and send all of your hate mail to me on Twitter at Arkwolf, ARKWULF, because I'm doing it wrong, and I'm not introducing her to it in the right blah, blah, blah.
Whatever.
There's no right way to introduce someone to Star Wars. The best advice that I have for anybody is... really think about the person, think about what they like, and then find the Star Wars movie that fits that the best. Yeah. Because people have enough pop culture knowledge to know enough to jump into any Star Wars movie. Yeah. And they're actually really great for that. Don't start people on the Phantom Menace. Yeah, no. That is a surefire way to kill anybody's love for Star Wars.
You could skip it entirely, I feel. I mean, I'll get a better sense when I watch Attack of the Clones next week to like remember. Is it Attack of the Clones is the next one? Yeah.
And I think that you can start at Attack of the Clones and then circle back around and watch the Phantom Menace if you feel like it. Yeah. But yeah, so... No,
you should always do 5, 6... Or no, 4, 5,
4,
6.
5. No, the best method is the shotgun method, which is 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, and now 7 and 8. Yeah. Although, like, I have to revise. I have to look at that. I really have to look at that because I actually think you start with Solo.
Whoa, interesting.
Start with Solo and then watch Rogue One, but you watch Rogue One and A New Hope in one sitting.
Oh yeah, because
it's one story.
It's one story. Yeah, you're right. Totally.
You watch those in one sitting, and then you watch Empire, and then you watch. If you really want to get the full Star Wars experience, you watch Empire, and you go, "Oh my God, Darth Vader is Luke's father." And then you go back, you watch 2, you watch all of the important episodes of the Clone Wars, which I have a definitive list somewhere, and I need to publish it, but there's a definitive list for me of, like, these are the episodes of Clone Wars you absolutely have to watch. Everything else is just kind of, like, additional stories. But, you watch those parts of the Clone Wars, and then you go back, watch 3, and then finish with 6. And then... 7 and 8, I guess, at some point. But but back to the Phantom Menace. Starting with that, and whenever I watch Star Wars movies with Kara, I read the scroll for her because she's 2.5. She can't read yet, right? And so I'm reading the whole thing, and it ends with and the Chancellor has dispatched 2 Jedi Knights to investigate, and she goes. 2 Jedi? And I go, 2 Jedi Knights, who do you think it is? And she goes, Yoda and Star Wars. And I was like, Star Wars isn't a character, sweetie. But no, it's not Yoda. It's do you have any other guesses? And she just shrugs and puts her hands up. I don't know.
Does she know Obi-Wan though?
She knows Obi-Wan, and I was like, do you think maybe Obi-Wan? And she goes, Obi-Wan Kenobi? like clarifying, like, do you don't mean Obi-Wan Solo or whatever, right? Like, it's like, yes, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And she's like, maybe. So we get there and they come out and everything. We're watching the movie. And I enjoyed watching it again with her. But yeah, she definitely lost interest the second that everybody starts talking about things instead of doing stuff. And the whole middle of the movie, she did not care for the pod race, which I know neither did you.
No. I texted you in the... I was literally filing tax paperwork while I was doing it and more enthralled in the tax paperwork.
I mean, honestly, based on the content of the Phantom Menace, doing your taxes while watching the Phantom Menace is the 4D experience. So that makes sense to me.
Okay.
It's like you weren't really planning to do that today, but then you started watching the Phantom Menace and you're reading the beginning and you're like, taxation of trade routes. Have I filed my taxes yet?
Yeah.
It's like, I better do that.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the middle of the movie and you're like, did that thing just fart? Did Jar Jar just go pee Yusa to that thing farting? I think I'll do my taxes now.
Yeah. Also, I forgot...
And then you don't need to get back into it until Duel of the Fates.
I forgot about Jar Jar Binks and how upsetting he is.
Yeah.
He's such an upsetting character. And like I get
upsetting in what way? Like expound on that a little bit more, because I have the counterpoint for you.
That the racial politics conversations aside, he's just like an embarrassing character. So like you watch him and you're kind of like it's trying to be funny. Like whoever wrote him was trying to be comedic with this character that's supposed to be charming, but he doesn't have any of that. It's unearned. And so everything he's doing is just like grating instead of being in any way like cute or endearing. And also the design of him too is like, it's just the Gungans are a weird Gungans are like a weird I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, man.
So on the racial politics side of it, the thing that I always say to everybody when they get into that, they go, oh, George Lucas, he's racist, he did this, he did that. And it's like, well, with the character of Jar Jar, that character was very generic until Ahmed Best came in, and they developed that character together. So the elements of the character that end up coming off as Rastafarian and all that comes from Ahmed Best. Ahmed Best is an African American, and like that's his background. So he brought that into the character, and that's why that aspect of the character isn't in any of the other Gungans, right? Like if you really pay attention to it, because like Brian Blessed is Boss Nass.
Oh, okay.
Right, like
that's the one that like shakes.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah. You couldn't get further away, right? Because you're going to like one of the like your standard British actors, like character actors for that character, and so you don't get any of that vibe with him. So yeah, I always say that that's just kind of the caveat. Is it a little bit insensitive, and is it in this day and age inappropriate? I'd say probably right on the border of yes, it is. Like it's just over the line. But I also think that in the list of offenses that the Phantom Menace and the prequels sort of perpetrate, Jar Jar is in the medium to not important scale.
He's just
the Nemoidians are a way more problematic species because they've got Chinese-ish accents. All they care about is money and trade routes and blah 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 and all that sort of stuff. They're the bad guys, and the design of their eyes accidentally. I don't think that, because these things are developed in like, this is the problem with the prequels, is that you have all of these departments developing in silos, and it's not until it all comes together, which is why George Lucas is the responsible party.
Yeah, because he's
the guy who's supposed to watch and go like, ooh, that accent with those eyes, not okay.
Right. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The other person who is the most responsible for the prequels, and in particular the Phantom Menace, being the gong show that they are, is Rick McCallum. He's the executive producer. He's the Fox producer for the movie. He's the guy that's supposed to be standing there and going like, George, are you sure?
Right.
And it was Alan Ladd on the original Star Wars, and Alan Ladd Jr. is, or was, I think he's passed away now, a genius. 100% genius. Like, he's responsible for some of the most visionary films of all time. Star Wars, Blade Runner, like, there's a list of movies
that he was the executive in charge of.
Yeah. And he made Star Wars happen. Star Wars doesn't happen without Alan Ladd Jr. because everybody else in Hollywood had passed.
Right, yeah.
It's like, you're the guy who did THX 1138, that weird art movie that nobody likes.
Yeah.
And, American Graffiti was a little bit successful, I guess. And that's the only reason that Star Wars ends up happening, because American Graffiti was a bit had a good amount of success.
Mm-hmm.
And George was able to sort of like use that at 20th Century Fox with Alan Ladd to get in the door and get this movie made. But he originally wanted Disney to make it, which is why the other thing when people go, oh, Disney Star Wars, like, this is where it was always supposed to be.
Right, yeah.
They were always supposed to be Disney movies, but Disney passed on it.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't see the future, right?
Yeah.
And then they immediately went, oh no, we made a mistake, let's make Tron. But yeah, Alan Ladd Jr. is responsible for Star Wars happening, and he's also responsible for Star Wars being successful, because George Lucas is a visionary, but visionaries tend to go off into the weeds and do their own thing.
You need somebody to tell you no.
And and the movie was over budget. It wasn't on time. There were all of these problems, and without Alan Ladd saying to George Lucas, "You got to get this together. You have to make sure that I've put my neck on the line. This is your entire career. If you don't pull this off, you're never gonna work again."
Right. Yeah.
Like, you're gonna be an editor sitting in a dungeon somewhere doing commercials, right? That forces George Lucas to walk into ILM and say to those guys, like, what the hell are you guys doing? You're spending all this money and all of this footage looks like crap. Here's what I want you to do. And he goes in, and then Industrial Light and Magic becomes the greatest special effects house on the planet, right? Like, for a very long time. It wasn't until Lord of the Rings that all of a sudden this Weta Workshop pops up and they're like, they're almost as good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, with that Skywalker sound, all of the companies that George Lucas creates specifically to make his movie, that stuff all happens because Alan Ladd pushes him for it.
Right, yeah.
Fast forward 20 years later to the point where we're doing the special editions, and then we're starting on the prequels. Rick McCallum is the executive producer there, and he's just like, brilliant, George, to every single decision. You can see it in behind the scenes footage and all of the documentary footage. And there's a really great documentary about the Phantom Menace where the whole way through the production you see it. You see them going through and they're doing all of the art direction and stuff like that, and they're kind of doing it in a silo, away from the writing and away from the acting and all of like the actual film production. And it's like George is just walking through stamping things and writing and going like, oh yeah, I like this guy, but make his horns bigger. You know, stupid stuff that he shouldn't be worried about.
Yeah.
But because he's George Lucas, everybody's like, oh my God, what's he saying?
Yeah.
Make the horns bigger. This is how you make a Star Wars movie. And everybody's just saying yes to him at every turn. Nobody's challenging him. And then they sit down for the first screening of the first cut of the movie, and you see everybody's faces as they all realize this movie is not coming together well. Because it's artificial. The whole thing from start to finish. The original Star Wars movies were successful based on their authenticity. Yeah. And I would say that's the thing.
And universal storytelling and like human condition, like monomyth narrative, all that stuff. Whereas this, it's about taxation of trades routes and like gambling. Like, it's such a, and you're kind of like, I get what you were maybe going for in the idea of like, look, this whole epic saga started with something as pedantic as political bargaining. Like, I get that you could be like, it is, but like,
ultimately it ends up being important, and the story that George Lucas tells across the prequels and in the Clone Wars as well is a great story. It is a fantastic story. What he chose to put in the movies is not great.
Yeah.
And how he executed on those stories in the films, not great. Right? And we're going to talk about this a lot over the next 3 weeks of us going through the prequels. There are moments of greatness. There are flashes of what makes Star Wars Star Wars. The Phantom Menace arguably has the least of that, because what it has that makes Star Wars is a great soundtrack. The score by John Williams is one of the best ones that he's ever done. Duel of the Fates is an iconic piece of music.
Is that the Darth Maul fight?
Yeah. The Droid Invasion is a great piece of music as well. Like, there's great, beautiful score in the film. Some of the action sequences are phenomenal. The lightsaber fights were groundbreaking and amazing at the time.
Although, how many times did Ewan McGregor do a split jump to kick people? I noticed it many times. It was the same move.
Signature move, yeah.
Okay.
It definitely is a little bit in
so many times I was like, oh, there it is.
Probably again. A thing that they were developing the fight style for the Jedi, because they brought in stunt coordinators and stuff for this, and it's the first time on the original movies there wasn't really much.
Yeah. Right.
There was a bit, but not a lot. And I'll bet you anything what happened is that they found out that Ewan McGregor could do a split kick.
Yeah,
and so fair. It was like, Ewan, do the split kick here.
Yeah.
Because we don't need to bring in a stunt guy.
Yeah.
Right? He's kicking fake robots.
Yeah.
Ewan, do a split kick. We'll cut it into the movie. And that's with the prequels, that is the biggest problem. Is that you can tell that they made these movies a little bit like jazz. That there was a little bit of we'll just do it, and then there's so much we're gonna do in post. We're gonna fix it all in post. Whatever. Yeah. It'll all come together. And George Lucas is an editor, first and foremost. That's why the first 3 movies are fantastic. But he also was forced to film those movies, and especially with Empire, he didn't film that one.
Yeah, it was.
Irvin Kershner did, and Kershner was a phenomenal director. Richard Marquand was a ham and egger. He was like a shooter. He came in to tell the camera crew what to do. He was really more of a fancy DOP.
Which one is he?
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
George Lucas directed that movie,
okay, yeah.
but whatever.
Yeah.
We'll talk way more about that when we get into those ones. He is not an actor's director, and he's not a great visual storyteller from a blocking
and when you have to create something from scratch, and then because he could take the pieces and edit them together, but that's not how visual effects work. You have to create it.
So the thing about the originals that made them work so well was the practicality of it, right? Because that's all he could pull off. You have to put actors in those costumes, and then those actors do a little bit of something which is called business in the background. Yeah. And when you watch the cantina scene in A New Hope, there's all sorts of business going on.
Yeah.
People are just and if you've ever acted, anybody who's ever done theater or whatever, it's if you get a background part, and you've got the right attitude, you go into that with the other people that you have the background part with, or even if it's just a supporting actor or supporting part or whatever. You work with other people to go let's build a little thing over here.
Yeah.
Because if somebody looks over at us, I want them to keep looking at us. Yeah. I want to be the guy in the background that steals the show, right? And there's all sorts of that in the original trilogy.
Which I will say is what makes you a terrible background actor.
Sure. Yeah. But when you're doing high school theater or whatever, but it does work in movies, right? Because when you think about it, you think about in A New Hope when they're in the Yavin briefing room, and there's all these pilots around or whatever.
Yeah, they're doing stuff.
There's there are guys turning and talking to each other during the middle of the thing. So then when we cut to it's happening, and then Wedge says to Luke, he's I don't 2 meters wide, and then Luke turns to him and goes, I've hit womp rats, they're only 2 meters wide, right? And it's that's not just them doing it, it's everybody's kind of doing it, right? And that carries through in all sorts of scenes in the original trilogy. This movie, The Phantom Menace, there's none of that. So there's a scene where Jar Jar, he steals the frog thing, and then the guy goes, that's 7 whoopie whoopie, and he goes, 7 whoopie whoopie, and he spits it out. And it lands in Sebulba's soup, and then Sebulba comes over to beat the crap out of him. There's a million background actors there, right? There's I think I counted it. There's 10 guys in the shot, and they all kind of have variations of the same terrible costume.
Yeah.
And it's a conical hat with a little thing coming off the back of it, and some weird robes, and then some weird face makeup, some squares on their face or something. And they're all sitting around, and there was a point where they had probably blocked the scene, or there would have been a point where they blocked the scene where there's an actor doing Sebulba, and there's an actor and Ahmed Best is doing Jar Jar, and they're blocking out the scene to give everybody the cue of what's going to happen. This is new technology at the time, right? Yeah. They're okay, and then you guys step out. The only other people who had ever done this successfully was Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right?
Where they were actually literally hand drawing the characters in. So it's okay. Ahmed Best steps out. The guy who plays Sebulba steps out, and we're gonna shoot the clean slate so that we can put these characters in digitally later. And you can tell that these background actors had no idea what they were supposed to be doing, because they are sitting. They're all looking at the tennis ball for sure. That's all they're doing. Right. There's no business going on.
They don't know what's actually happening. They're not dynamic.
Yeah. They're not reacting to Sebulba grabbing Jar Jar by the neck and about to punch him, and then Anakin running in. Nothing is happening in the background.
Because they don't know what's happening,
And the movies are just hollow as a result. Yeah. When we get into episode 2 and episode 3, it'll be even more evident when we're in the Jedi Temple and it's all a digital set.
Right, yeah, it's just
And it sucks because it's not George Lucas's fault. It's not. And I'm a bit of an apologist when it comes to Star Wars for sure, because I love it so much. But I'll also say, no one's done this before.
Right, yeah. He was doing something that was pretty groundbreaking. You forget about that. I will say, the VFX hold up. That's the thing is, 20 years later, you forget that those are characters that were made completely CG, and that... But I get what you're talking about. There's even stuff where, one of the scenes that really caught me was one where I was like, where are they getting Jar Jar to walk? That doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, oh, it's because they probably shot it not considering where he is, and then they picked that particular thing and had to CGI him in around, because it doesn't hook up with the next shot that they used at all for where he is. It's basically when he follows them into Tatooine or whatever. Into
Mos Espa,
and I'm kind of he's walking around these BG people, and I'm kind of oh, that's because they just wanted to use that because it was the nice crane up shot, but there's no place for him to walk behind the main characters because you didn't consider that when you were filming it. It's just, but...
And George Lucas is really famous for doing things like in a digital shot like that, of going it doesn't make sense for him to walk straight because all this is happening. So get him to walk around it, and give him a reason. He steps in some poop.
Yeah, right? Yeah,
and that's how that stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so it's not... It just feels weird. Everything in these movies is going to feel weird for a little bit. And it's going to get better as they go. Attack of the Clones is a little bit better. And then Revenge of the Sith is a good movie for the most part. It's just way too rushed. It's kind of like the last season of Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. So when you have an end point and you have a midpoint, and you're like, we got to get from here to there in one movie. And then you cram it all in, right? To the point that then his next thing was I gotta tell more of this story, and I gotta tell it better, and they do the Clone Wars.
Right, yeah.
Because there's so much more story to tell there.
Clone Wars takes place between 2 and 3?
Between 2 and 3, yeah. But yeah, it's just, there is such an artificiality to this movie right from the outset, from the first line of that, when they're in the bridge of the Republic ship as it's coming up, and this woman turns and says whatever she says about we're receiving communicate, and Qui-Gon says whatever, and they've got their hoods up, and it's it's mysterious, and it's why?
Yeah.
Why is it mysterious? Think back to the first Star Wars movie and the beginning of that, and it's just bam, Star Wars, and the thing goes up, and then we just see, and the ships come
right
overhead,
immediately,
and you're into it. Mm-hmm. And then with this one, we start on some ships, and there's kind of slow, and then we go in, and it's we're gonna have some negotiations, I guess, and it's this slow reveal of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and the thing about all of that is that it's the only reason that works is because the other movies exist.
Yeah, it wouldn't work as a movie on its own, and that gimmick isn't there. Like, you know that the whole point of them having their hoods up is so you get that reveal where they're finally in a room. It's just the two of them, and they release their hoods, and you're like, yeah, and it's like it's unearned.
But imagine, if you will, the movie starts on Naboo, the droid invasion has begun. And the beginning of the movie is like these things just mowing down this forest, and all of a sudden this dude is running in front of it, and this other creature is like, "What's going on?" And he grabs this guy and saves him. Yeah. That's where you start your movie, and now all of a sudden you're like, "What is happening? What? Who is that guy? What's that thing? Like, what's going on?" And then he's like, "Okay, we gotta get up. These things are coming and they're invading, and we've gotta do something about it." And he's like, "Oh, I can lead you to the Gungan city." And then you keep moving, and then you get the entrance of the staff coming in. It's like, and then Obi-Wan comes in and blows it up, saves them, and turns around and it's like, "I'm Obi-Wan," and it's like, "This is my Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi." Yeah. That's a cool entrance for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah.
And it's earned, and you're like, "Oh, this is why I care about these people. Like, they're here, and they're doing something interesting." And then later, like, nothing happened on that ship anyways. You just realize that you're like, the negotiations never happened, right? It's like, where were they? And it's like, there wasn't any. The one thing that after 7 years of watching Arrow, I think I've said this on the Quiver podcast before, that I feel like I could successfully write an action movie, because that's like 101. You start your movie with an action scene, and then you find out about the characters.
That's why Indiana Jones is one of the greatest movies of all time, because that movie starts a little bit slow, because there's a little bit of a mystery vibe to it as well. Yeah. But it starts with, like, we're in the jungle, right? Yeah. It's the Paramount logo, fades to the mountains, and then pans down, and it's like, and then it's this guy and the guy's like gonna betray him. And then you get whoosh with the whip, and then Indy steps out of the shadow, and you're like, I don't know who this guy is yet, but he's awesome. It's Harrison Ford, so we already agreed. Everybody agrees that he's awesome the second you see him. Yeah. And then you go into the temple, and like you go in, and it's immediately the shadow thing, and it does the hand, and the thing comes out, and it's got the guy's, like, the dead skull on it or whatever. And
I have to admit, I don't remember the last time I watched Indiana Jones. No.
It's so good.
I don't even know if I watched the whole thing.
And it culminates in him with the you know, there's he's got to replace the thing and the ball and all that, which is all so iconic. And that's how you start a story. Yeah. Like, that's how you start a movie.
It's just, like, really cool because you learn about the character. Anyways, so that's the biggest thing I think with this one too.
In media res is the term for it. But that's how you start action movies. That's how you start. Yeah. That's how you start genre stories. Yeah. And it's all the good ones. That's how Guardians of the Galaxy start. Well, Guardians starts with the first piece with his mother dying. But then it breaks and it goes into the actual movie. Yeah.
But it's I don't know. There's just so many different things in this movie that you're like, if you had just shifted like a few things slightly, it would have. Honestly, the pod racing, 25% of that would have been fine. Yeah. Like, it just, I don't get why they thought that was in any way like suspense. Like, it just like is a thing where it's like
that Anakin like, wasn't gonna win,
right? Like it's like it's just false and it's unearned, and it's like, whatever, sure, that's exciting and whatever, they're gonna win, but it's, I mean, whatever. We got through it, and it's cute, and you realize that it is a kid's story. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in the movie. There's a lot of cool design. There's great music. The duel with Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul at the end of the movie is really fantastic. Cool. But it's rough. Yeah. It's definitely rough around the edges, because George Lucas hadn't made a movie since 1983, and he wasn't really the one who made it. He was there producing it, but there's another director on set. And then he goes in, and this is one of the other pieces of the prequels that's really interesting. He initially asked Steven Spielberg to make episode 1. And Spielberg said no. And what he said to George, and he's like on record as saying this, he said to George, no, these are your movies. You're a director. You make it. Which Spielberg hasn't made a great movie in a very long time. The last really great one, I think, was probably Munich. a lot of the movies that he's made since Jurassic Park have been disappointments to a lot of people. Both he and George Lucas were directors of a time.
Yeah.
And,
definitely.
And their success is their biggest deficit, because that success allows them to do whatever they want.
Right.
But, I don't have a lot of respect for Steven Spielberg, having said that to George Lucas, because anybody who really has studied the work of George Lucas knows he is not a director. He is a visionary. He's a technical genius, and he is probably one of the greatest editors that's ever lived.
Right.
Like that we've ever had the pleasure of like seeing something that he's cut together. And I say that with the most reverence possible.
Right.
Like, and he is an expert on mythic storytelling, but he should not have directed the prequels. That's what
everybody agrees on,
Yeah.
and yeah.
But the last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap it up. The stories are good stories. If you remove them from the execution, the story of the prequels is a great story. The story of the fall of Anakin Skywalker is a great story. It's just not done well.
Yeah.
And it's a shame.
Yeah.
And as a Star Wars fan, I hate to see it. But when I think back on the story, it always makes me happy.
Because it's a cool, and that's the thing, I got more appreciation for the prequels learning more about what I think the expectation of the newest iterations from Force Awakens to Rise of Skywalker is in Kylo Ren, because I love his character so much, and that people were talking about it as sort of a reverse prequel storytelling, and that made me have like more respect for it. In being like, oh, this was a particular kind of story that they had been telling in the prequels, where it's like, this is the fall of this character, and it's a redemption arc in the opposite end of that, like how legacies are redeemed and that like, and it also has made me realize who is it that's going to bring balance to the Force then? That's not Luke.
Yeah.
That's like Rey or Kylo.
It's
like
Rey.
It's Rey, right?
It's
like,
100% Rey.
But
and I've said a million times, it's like the problem.
Yeah.
Some people are gonna hate this, but probably not our audience. You want to bring balance to the Force? Don't let a man do it. Because what do they do? Like, what does Anakin do? His greed, his avarice, his anger gets the best of him.
Yeah.
He doesn't consider what's good for everybody. He considers what's good for him.
Yeah.
Luke, his pride,
yeah,
his fear get in the way.
Yeah.
With Rey, she goes, I don't want this.
Yeah.
I never wanted this, but I have this power and I need to know, where do I fit into all of this? How do I do this? Yeah. She's the right one to rebuild the Jedi Order. It was never Luke. It was never going to be Luke.
Yeah.
Luke,
Luke
was a stepping stone on the path to the new Jedi Order.
Yeah.
He was not the new Jedi Order.
Yeah.
So,
but it
he's
couldn't
an important
happen
part
without
of
the
that.
Skywalkers,
Yeah.
though. I think
Yeah.
that's like part. What do you think the Rise of Skywalker is?
We don't have time for that.
Can we not?
We gotta wrap this one up.
Fine.
We'll save it for
but
later.
It makes you reflect. Like going to the beginning,
Yeah.
I will say the thing that the Phantom Menace is good for, and because there's got to be a few things, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things is that it makes you reflect on stories and origins and beginnings and endings and how you get places and like what it is, the impetus for doing things. And so to crack this open and sort of be like the things that they destroyed with midichlorians and taking away the magic, what can you get out of something like this? And the idea of like it's just a story about people, right? And that there was this sort of power in the universe that they put, if you tell somebody that they are something, how much are they going to believe that that's what they are and like grow into that? So I don't know. I just think it's kind of interesting. I'm glad Phantom Menace exists, I guess, but I really do think you can just lift it out and it's whatever. Don't know when I'm gonna watch it again. That's
cool. So right now it sits as number 1 because it's the only movie that we've put on the ranking.
That's fair.
But
I like how this works.
I think it'll change next week.
Okay.
But that's it for now.
Yay.
We'll be back next week with another episode of the ThunderQuack Podcast and our ranked discussion for Attack of the Clones. There's nothing to stay up to date with. Just if you want to stay up to date with all the content on ThunderQuack, you can head to ThunderQuack.com. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ThunderQuack. I'm pretty sure it's just ThunderQuack. Or just search ThunderQuack Podcast Network. We're on Twitter at ThunderQuackNet and on Instagram at ThunderQuack Podcast.
Yeah. You can also follow us individually. I'm at Akonkin, Akonkin. That's on Twitter, and on Instagram you can add an 86 to find me there.
And on Twitter and Instagram I am at ArkwWulf, ARKWULF. And if you like what you hear, we don't have to tell people to go to the ThunderQuack website because they're already going to it.
That's exciting.
It's totally different.
Welcome to the new world of ThunderQuack.
Yeah. If you like what you hear, you can support us in two ways. First, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some awesome merchandise. And the other way is by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack and kicking in with your monthly pledge of support. So if you're already a supporter, we thank you for that. But if you're not, your pledge of $1 gets you access to the early access to the ThunderQuack podcast every Tuesday. Otherwise, if you don't want to pay us for that, you can wait until Friday and get it for free on podcast services around the globe. And we've got the extended uncut ThunderQuack podcast.
Yeah.
So you can get the full conversation.
In addition to the random crap we talk about, you get additional random crap.
It's
good.
crap.
But in a good way.
That's at the $5 level. So head to patreon.com/ThunderQuack if any of that sounds interesting to you. And we appreciate everybody's support. We really want to get that number up so that we can improve audio quality. We can do some video stuff, and we can push ThunderQuack forward into the future. That's it for this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Sharp arrowheads?
Yeah, you gotta figure it out. Figure it out.
Hey, can we just ask other people to tweet us suggestions for how we end these things? Because really, can I continue to say stay sharp arroheads?
Until we have something else.
You
can say that.
But
you can say stay sharp Thunderquackers.
Well, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't need to make sense.
Stay ducky.
No, that's not it.
Okay. Quack quack. I've done that so many times.
Yeah.
It's the only thing ducks say. I'm gonna be